The Edge of Tomorrow is an unfiltered journey into the remarkable minds of the people shaping the future of technology and its impact on humanity. This show isn't just about gadgets and trends, it's about the humanity behind the innovation. Together, we explore the big questions. How does technology reshape our values, communities, and sense of purpose? What lessons can leaders draw from these transformations to create a more inclusive, ethical, and impactful future? The Edge of Tomorrow is more than a show. It's a journey to discover what lies ahead and how we can all navigate the challenges and opportunities of a world driven by rapid innovation. Our goal is simple: to make life more meaningful, leadership more impactful, and the future brighter for everyone. In every episode, Dr. Martha sits down with some of the world's most visionary leaders, pioneers, and thinkers to uncover untold truths, unlearned lessons, and profound insights about how the technologies of today are redefining the world of tomorrow. Welcome to the Edge of Tomorrow with Dr. Martha Beckenfeld.
Very warm welcome to the next episode with my friend and a person I feel I know very well. We talked about it that we feel like sometimes we are twins because our interests are so aligned, and what we do, we care. We are deep into science, technology, art. We love what we do. We are very passionate about it. And what is foremost, our target are humans. So what does it mean for humans and technology? And I know you do a lot of education as well as consulting. And I can't imagine how to introduce you properly, so I will give the word to you. What is the most important you want to highlight for those maybe who don't know you yet?
Well, I think the easy introduction is, first of all, thank you for inviting me. And the second one is that I've spent the last 25 years at the intersection of academia, technology, and more recently, diplomacy. And when I use the word diplomacy, it's in the broader sense. We want to all envision ourselves as ambassadors of responsible use of technology. And so that has been a very big area of focus for me over the last few years as well. And today, I know we have an exciting topic, and I'm looking forward to answering a few of the questions that I think you and the audience might have for us.
So who is the doctor in the room now with all the technology? That will be the theme of the episode today. 45 minutes is nothing compared to the universe, which is out there, as we know. And you have a deep knowledge from different sets or hats even you have been wearing as a patient, as someone who cares for someone who is a patient, as a CEO of a healthcare company, as an academic. What is coming back to you where you think this is the most important? Everyone has to know this is a theme, a trend, a topic, or a mindset.
For me, it has been very clear: trust. And as a clinician, that meant trust between the patients, their families, and the clinicians that took care of them. As an executive, it's digital trust. When we deploy technology, if no one trusts that technology, then you can't accomplish what you want to accomplish. And then also more recently, in terms of deep tech diplomacy, if we don't have trust at a societal level and ecosystem level, we also can't have the outcomes that we all desire from technology. So if I have to pick only one, it's trust. And that translates for patients into patient safety, which is very important. That has been the main characteristic that made me choose medicine in the first place, and that drove all my career choices afterwards. It doesn't matter if it was research or any of the executive roles I had.
I think this is one of the most important establishing trust, but also the most challenging part of what we do. So in your experience, how do create the trust? So from my point of view, also, if I'm a patient and I have all this technology, I have the digital twin, I have a doctor coming with an AI diagnosis, because we have seen in studies that AI diagnoses are better than even from doctors. How can I trust this?
My response might surprise you, but in my experience, it is a few combined elements that can signal to us that the patients and their families trust us. The one that I've learned very late, but it's very important, is the cultural sensitivity. When you talk to patients, you must have the cultural sensitivity, how to explain things to them. Science and knowledge are not important in that conversation. It's choosing the right words that are attuned to their cultural background. Otherwise, you will not gain their trust. The second one that I've engaged in quite a lot, and I've dedicated a lot of years to push for it and to uphold it, is appropriate informed consent. Even in the non-digital world, we didn't do a good job as an ecosystem to give proper informed consent to patients and their families. They all sign a paper, but when you ask them later on, did you truly understand what you signed, what it meant? They will, majority, more than 90%, and we did multiple studies on this, tell you that they didn't truly understand. They heard the words and they maybe looked up the words, but they didn't truly understand what it meant to them, to their life, to their family, what the consequences would be. So true informed consent that is, again, attuned to the patient's education, literacy about healthcare, and again, cultural or religious beliefs is very important, and we still don't do a good job. As a matter of fact, now the digital informed consent suffers even more from accuracy. Patients are asked to sign all the time on an electronic gadget, sometimes 14, 15 times per encounter. And they all share, sadly, that they don't understand what that means, but they know they have to sign it if they want to proceed with whatever they're seeking in that day, whatever clinical care or research visit that they have. So I think those are extremely important, and we must improve because we're still deficient, unfortunately, in traditional informed consent and digital informed consent.
But how can we, I find this is very difficult and as a core part, how can we educate people better? Because obviously not everyone has the knowledge and the science and doesn't have to have it, in my view. So how can we people give that access and make sure they know? We have also seen that a lot of people, fortunately or unfortunately, depending, use AI right now to respond to very difficult questions, and they are not used to research, so they can't ask the right questions maybe. So how can perhaps also we help? How can AI help? How can the doctors help? How can government help?
My response might surprise you and our audience again, but I learned the hard way that all the knowledge, all the science, all our beautiful protocols and policies and procedures are not as valuable as another patient explaining it to patients and being with you in the room. And sometimes that immediately enhances trust because the patient that you're trying to gain trust from then feels much more comfortable to ask questions. They don't feel shy. They don't feel uncomfortable asking what they think are maybe not eloquent questions. So when the patient education is done by other patients, we get the best results. That's not always possible, but learning from how patients explain their care and explain it to other patients, that can teach us how to adjust our ability to explain things during a session or during a procedure or before a procedure to patients. So we, as clinicians, researchers, administrators, need to be humble, in my opinion, and learn from patients. This is not in a book. It's not going to be in a protocol, but we need to listen how they describe it. And another great example is how children describe something that happened to them. It's amazing to me, and I've learned a lot from children that were chronically ill, how they describe their care and what happens to their body during a whole clinical and digital health journey to to family members, for instance. And I learned a lot from them. It just requires a different vocabulary and us to accept that the knowledge that we have, which is also important, it just does not apply to gaining trust. It's a whole different domain.
And it's also, I think, too much of a ask. That's why I, as you know, try to have nearly every day now the patient stories where real patients have experiences and share them. And often this has a big resonance because, first of all, you see, wow, it's working there. And in my personal experience, when I did the digital twin of my brain, then obviously a lot of people ask me, wow, how was it and how do you feel about it? And alone going to make this digital twin of a brain with what we have today was for me a big question mark. I had a lot of discussions also within my family, but I can imagine when I talk to my friends, they also say, why should I do it? And if I find out I have cancer, or if I find out I have Alzheimer, what does it do for me? And I think we have to also make sure that people realize that you get more time to figure out what to do the earlier you have the control points. And to that effect, we have this overwhelming technology, and we see that it's not even exponential anymore. We talk about this takeoff like a rocket. And in your view, and from what you see in this massive world of explosion, what are the perhaps 3 technologies which really drive also the next decade, and what impact do they create for people? Which diseases we can tackle first? It's always a lot of questions I have, but
3 are tough to pick, but I will try. So obviously the one that's dominant and everybody knows, and it's the way I like to see it, the one that everyone invests now is, of course, multi-agentic AI and complex AI orchestration platforms that can support digital health. But I would like to point out more silent ones that have even more impact long term, because the AI tools are only a tool, even if they're highly complex. But things that you already mentioned, technologies that are like a digital twin platform, or technologies like quantum simulation and quantum computing, or technologies that are silent but will also transform other domains within healthcare, such as payments or trust, are blockchain technologies. And I'll elaborate on that a little bit more later. So if I have to just pick a few, these would be the main ones that are currently really, I would say, disrupting the way we do research, the way we do clinical care in certain areas of the world, not everywhere, the way we also focus now on global population health to try to tackle some of the diseases that were considered incurable over the past several hundred years or even longer. And then the way we also redesign the healthcare delivery ecosystem, not just the care, but the buildings where we want to offer wellness or longevity care or acute care or chronic care. The type of things we care about when we deliver care. And that type of regenerative healthcare ecosystem or planet positive healthcare ecosystem is also important. And a lot of investments are being done, but it's not attracting so much attention yet. But we will feel it in the next decade or even longer, and future generations will benefit from it. So if we ask what's the technology that's influencing mostly today, every single day in every hospital, it's going to be AI, without a doubt. That's the fact. If you ask me which one can secure trust for the next few decades, it's blockchain technology through its extremely powerful characteristics that can offer trusted AI. If you ask me which one can have tremendous benefits to really bring all these silos together, it's digital twinning for healthcare. And then if you ask me which one is the one that can offer solutions that we never thought were possible, that can identify new medications that we never thought were possible, that can identify new approaches to disease diagnosis or curing disease completely, it's quantum. The quantum portfolio, with particularly simulation and computation capabilities, will completely disrupt research, healthcare, and the way we approach wellness, the way we approach aging and a healthy lifespan.
If we dive or look a little bit more, you have also mentioned it, one of the top technologies you believe in is also my belief from what I'm seeing is digital twins. So if you maybe cluster this a little bit for patients, what does a digital twin mean? What does it mean for someone running a hospital and just a doctor caring for the patient? So if you step into the roles also you were referring to in your experience, what is the human aspect of having this digital twin and what are we able to do with it?
Great point. So from a patient perspective, you'll never know that there was a digital twin involved that was used by your team. But what you want to care about as a patient, if your team used digital twinning, is that it allows the team to take all your past history, and that includes medical history, behavioral history, nutrition history, lifestyle choices history, with the current problems that you're facing or current symptoms that you're experiencing or current things that you're doing in your life, and combine those with all other data that we have about other patients that experience similar history and similar current symptoms in order to create a prediction and a risk stratification for you, the patient now, that is customized for you. So the personalization is what patients should care about. That finally, it's not going to be that you're just a number in a medical record and you have to just have what fits almost everybody, which is called best practices. And that's important too. But we still want to adhere to best practices, obviously. We want to adhere to all the clinical guidelines and regulatory rules and the established clinical outcomes that we know are safe. But the personalization for each patient to make sure that we can customize it in a way that suits their body, their cultural background, their expectations about treatment. All that is what the patient should care about. So if someone explains a digital twin to the patient, it shouldn't even say anything about the sophisticated technology. It should just say, this new tool allows me to customize care to things that you care about and that are unique to your body. So in a very simple way. Now, researchers, completely different. For researchers, digital twinning finally allows them to not have to do their work in silos that can sometimes take 15 years. Now they can do all that work compressed in sometimes hours, combined with the AI portfolio. So we can do work that before was considered to take, even with normal approaches, 15 years. Pharma is a great example. It used to take from the design of a drug to bringing it to market 10 to 15 years when I trained and when I was head of research. Imagine. And now we have from conception of a drug to market, sometimes even just weeks or months. So definitely from a research perspective, the digital twinning has immediate impact, and the researchers will be able to understand also the analytics and technological benefits. Now, from a clinician perspective, the same approach, I would say, they don't need to know what's on the background, but what they do need to know is that the clinical intelligence that they are using to make decisions is powered by a digital twin that has background data, historical data, concurrent data, and the ability to do prediction, all for that patient that is in front of them. So clinicians can definitely benefit as well. And then the last one is healthcare administrators. That is not as commonly talked about, but healthcare administrators can also allocate budgets and resources appropriately when we have digital twinning for a hospital. And they can cut costs where we're wasting resources to allocate the resources where it's absolutely needed the most. So we don't talk often, but there are great examples that Siemens has accomplished and several other companies where digital twinning is used for operational efficiency in healthcare.
That's fantastic. I think that's why we cannot highlight it enough, and I haven't seen a lot of people who understand this. Even when you have all the data, you have the wearable, which are now more and more on vogue, and you have more healthcare data from yourself. So that brings me to what I find a real critical issue also with digital twin. When you have a digital twin of a patient, so you usually don't, maybe also for people to understand, you have the organs, you have the blood chemistry, you have the heart rhythm even, everything in real time. The question is, who owns this data? And you mentioned a lot of people will have access to it. So how do we make sure that the data, which is my data, I would fill as a patient, gets used in the way I want it to be used? And if we have already challenges that you mentioned, signing for normal, in quotes, checkups, etc., how does it work with digital twins?
Yeah, in order to answer that, I would like to say a clarifying question. When we think about data that's healthcare data, and particularly for digital twins that combine all types of data, literally all types of data, not only genomics, not only omics of the full portfolio, clinical, behavioral, environmental, you have to think IP rights, you have to think data stewardship, and then you have to think data access. The patient, even if you give them the full technology platform and the full architecture and the cloud environment, they don't care about that. They don't know what to do with it. And there's no patient that has ever asked for that. But they want to know the clinical aspects and have access to the intelligence derived from that data. That's what they all want. So data access, patient. With all the platforms that we have now, if you look at the fine print, patients will not own what's stored in the cloud. Patients will not own the analytics portion. Patients will not own the business intelligence derived from that. And more importantly, even hospitals oftentimes signed these agreements without reading the fine print, so they don't own many times those things either. But they own the clinical and strategic and business intelligence that's derived from it. So again, IP rights, it's often the company that created the algorithm and the analytics portion. Stewardship is up to the patient, clinicians, hospital administrators, the technology companies, third-party vendors, so everybody needs to have appropriate stewardship of data. Now, access, the patient needs to have access at all times to the data that is about them and has the right to block use of it. As we know, some countries do better at that, others, it's just on paper and it doesn't happen. But the patient should always have access. It's hopefully in the future that we'll have more democratization to the access also of monetizing data and sharing it appropriately, but we're not there yet. We're working on it. But that's the key aspect that I would like to highlight when we talk about who owns the data. It's not a simple black and white. It depends which portion of the data, and it depends where that data is located. If it's in the clinical healthcare record, it's patient. But once we start to get into complex technology architectures, cloud environments, the analytics platform that has a appropriate BAA contract, it gets more nuanced, and then patients will not be able to access, for instance, that. They'll just get what is in the clinical record, which is what they have the right to request now.
Yeah, in my view, the transparency of and ownership of data is a big challenge. So also that you said trust is the most important, which I obviously feel is absolutely 100%. But the problem is what happens to my data, and it's already now when I use AI, the data is used for training purposes. It's nice, it memorizes everything when I ask ChatGPT now, my blood tests are in there, everything. But not many people know how to opt out. And again, we need more education, what you can do. And we have OpenAI going into health, Amazon going into health. So every one of them is going into health. Apple for years is in health. They claim they keep everything private, but they're all creating platform ecosystem for you. And the choices are massive. So when you guide people, what would you say, how to make sure your data is safe? And I know you have been working on tons of frameworks and playbooks and how to use it. And what would you say how to, in practice, how to do it?
Well, again, for patients, none of the governance beautiful things we're crafting are important. For patients, what's important is to educate them. Once again, we come back to informed consent, that they need to insist that it's a time-limited and event-specific informed consent. A lot of patients are tricked, unfortunately. They don't read carefully, so they just sign blank, and then it's a perpetual consent. They need to be informed from the beginning that they have a right to just give partial consent, a one-time consent, time-limited consent, and even granular consent, which again, it's something where blockchain, together with AI and federated learning, can offer huge opportunities for patients. Of course, they don't need to know about the technology, but they need to know if you only want to share this tiny piece of the data with your oncologist or with your dentist or with your OBGYN, that's okay. You don't need to share all of it, but they're not always informed about that. So again, granular informed consent, time-limited informed consent, and event-specific informed consent. Just because I went once to the ER doesn't mean that the ER can use my data forever. And that is, again, education, and it can have huge impact. Second, if you find out, like with any other data breach, if you find out that someone used your data, you have a right to take action. So that's another important element, that patients need to be informed that it's not okay for those that were supposed to be responsible stewards of their data, that they can share it for perpetuity and do whatever they want with it. Now, one important distinction that I think is important for our audience members: identifiable patient data, unique patient data, one-to-one, like we just discussed, is different than aggregate data, which is specifically designed to be de-identified, aggregated for research and for analytics purposes. That's why we have those mechanisms. But what you asked is, how do we deal with the situations when the patients are, in a one-to-one situation with identifiable patient data? But for the rest of the universe that can use data appropriately, we just have to insist that data is aggregate, not traceable back to the individual, and we have plenty of mechanisms that can do that. And we need to make sure also that, once again, the unique consent that it was authorized for is being adequately documented. And then there's no problem. It's just a problem when we use it unwisely and without the appropriate consent.
Yeah, and in your work with government regulators and also hospitals, you have different stakeholders. So how do you make sure they are not fragmented and also working in silos, and work with those frameworks? And that's where also, I believe, the diplomacy kicks in, because you want that people are aware on all levels of this ethical frameworks, being responsible with data. And we see this already with normal data, in quotes, with everything we put out there. So how do we make sure this very sensitive healthcare data are aggregated? Yes, but OpenAI also does not have the reputation, or Meta in particular, to be in particular considerate with data. So how do we enforce this?
Yeah, if you asked me 20 years ago, when I was also in compliance and I did a lot of integration of data over the last few decades at a national and international level, it was much easier before. But now I'm a big believer that we need novel mechanisms of monitoring this appropriate stewardship of data. And that means use, exchange, analyzing it. And humans cannot keep up with the not only volume, but velocity of data being generated. You mentioned wearables, but it's not only wearables. Every data source currently has a speed and a velocity of production that exceeds human capacity. Like in finance, we have several hundred transactions per second for our financial mechanisms.
Yeah.
Therefore, human
And
auditors cannot keep pace. And it's the same in healthcare. Great example is if you just look at any payer, or any insurance that processes life insurance or disability insurance, they sometimes process 20 to 30, depending on the size, up to 50,000 claims per minute. So how can a human monitor that? Therefore, maybe some of you that know me, I push for a dynamic, autonomous way to monitor all of this and to orchestrate all these silos. And digital twins are actually one solution for that, and permissioned blockchain is another solution to make sure that we monitor all the appropriate exchanges of data according to all the laws, regulatory guidelines, but also according to the patient consents that we just discussed. So again, dynamic, autonomous auditing and monitoring is my recommendation, because humans, first of all, a lot of auditors, quality assurance, quality safety teams are not trained in the latest technologies. They're always left behind. So what we really should do is train them first before everyone else, so that they can monitor.
Absolutely. And obviously, with my insurance background, there's also the big question on insurance. Can insurances, how do they do the pricing? Can they decline if someone's digital twin maybe has also certain can they ask for digital twin data or other data? Because we will have a lot more data that you mentioned. When we live in smart cities like Singapore, then the whole system, the smart cities are connected and gathering data. Also, someone has a heart attack, he has a wearable, I can see the blood pressure rises, which is good. I can send some help there, but on the other side, you get completely visible. Obviously, we always have the dystopian view also on George Orwell, Big Brother is watching you, which we are not far off, but I know that you and I, we are very optimistic that we can use it for the good and also for the abundance, so people get access, people are inclusive. But insurance companies, I think, also have to change their mindset to be more focused on predictive medical care. So care starts before you are even sick. But how is that happening? Because you have to always fill out these forms. I just recently changed my insurance cover and I had to put in everything clearly, and then they check with my doctor and they check all the results if they accept me or not. Apart from obviously the mandatory, which we fortunately in Switzerland healthcare is still quite good compared to other countries.
Yeah, regarding your question, the specific one, if insurers can ask digital twin data, they can and they will if you're part of that insurance. But at this time, there's no insurer yet that's using a specific digital twinning platform in many countries. But I think we've seen just over the last few days, a lot of hubs have partnered with digital twin companies. And I think give it 1 or 2 more years, you will see that a lot of insurers will not only ask for that data, but I think they will deploy it as an internal tool. I actually several years ago designed a risk stratification tool for insurers, and it mirrored exactly what we're doing now in the modern digital twinning. We just had to do it more manual at that time because we didn't have a digital twin platform. But it's the good and the bad, as you highlighted. On the one hand, if used in a non-responsible way, it can of course do damage, but think about the positive. Insurers now can do the risk stratification to allocate appropriate amounts of help and the right type of care to those who need it most, as opposed to those who might not need it. So the risk stratification is essential to lower costs overall. Otherwise, we're just throwing the same amount of dollars at everything, and instead of a more precise approach. And again, like we've talked with everything else, digital twins allow us to have a more precise approach based on the strategic intelligence and clinical intelligence it can offer us. So like with everything, you highlighted it already. I think we've both mentioned it in numerous occasions. Electricity can hurt you, but it can also do a lot of good. Nuclear fusion can hurt all of us, but it also is used to give power that's actually quite clean. All the major inventions, if not used responsibly, they can hurt us. So the goal is, how do we use all these things in the most responsible way? And all of us should act as stewards. Can you hear us? Yes. So as Dr. Beckenfeld was just mentioning, we need to think about how digital twins can use all the multiple stakeholders in the ecosystem. And we highlighted already patients, we highlighted insurance, we highlighted clinicians. One of the stakeholders we did not address that much are research enterprises. So digital twins can have tremendous impact on the future of research to make it more effective, more efficient, and to allow that research insight to translate into the clinical decision support that clinicians need, and then, of course, have major impact on patient outcomes. We have seen over the last few years, particularly in the last 2-3 years, how digital twinning combined with multi-agentic AI and of course powered by the latest scientific advances such as the omics portfolio and bioengineering, stem cell, all the data gathered from our wearables, bioimplants, biosensors is being now collated in a matter of minutes, sometimes by complex AI systems powered within digital twin platforms. It can really offer unique insights that otherwise would not be possible.
I'm going to step in for Dr. Martha for a quick bit till she comes back, just to ensure there's continuity. Could you elaborate to us some of the regulatory issues around privacy of patient data when you go into concepts like digital twins and just the amount of sharing that we do with wearables? How do you see regulation responding back, or regulatory frameworks responding back to this issue of data?
Great point. Unfortunately, the legal and regulatory environment, as always, is lagging behind technological development. And there are several committees and groups actively working on trying to develop the not only laws and regulatory guidelines, but also the standards that we need for all the data that's being generated by the 24/7 collection of data, either through wearables, other sensors in our homes, as well as bioimplants and other devices such as the brain-computer interfaces or other human-computer interfaces. So at this time, we don't have perfect matching regulation, but there are several that are related. Of course, if there is AI involved, we've had already several pieces of legislation that are helping the ecosystem keep that data private with the caveats we discussed earlier. And then, of course, for blockchain, we have the beginnings of some of those standards as well. And we're hoping over the next few months to also have the final legal and regulatory guidelines on the other wearables as well as quantum. All of them are in the works, but not ready yet. I see Dr. Birkenfeld, you're back.
Yeah, the heat was too much for my computer, so I hope he will survive through the sessions. It's a summer heat; we have it everywhere, so he's suffering now. Yes, I have also another question which keeps me a bit up at night, I have to say, when we talk about technology and patients and doctors in the room together with AI and quantum. When there are, and we have the same, you mentioned banking is also highly regulated. We have it everywhere. The multi-agents, when they get active, when they give advice, when we use them for interpretation and other things. So who is really responsible when something goes wrong?
In a traditional encounter where either in person or virtual, you still have a physician that's licensed and credentialed interacting with a patient, it's always the physician that will be ultimately responsible. They have to either attest that they agree with whatever, any tool, doesn't have to be AI, any tool that was used, suggested to them, and they will be the ones legally responsible, meaning that they can be sued if something goes wrong. But the converse is true too. If the AI was right and the doctor dismisses it, they're also responsible, which has happened in several implementations we're doing. And then I would like to bring up another important factor. There are numerous encounters now that we see around the world where there's no more clinician involved. We have a direct-to-consumer healthcare ecosystem where consumers engage with tools. There's no clinician at all. And that's a more important question. Who is responsible then when consumers are accessing all these tools, get an answer, make decisions about their life that might turn out well or not well? Who's then responsible? Will the technology company that designed the algorithm and trained the algorithm be responsible? Yes, no. Or is it the patient ultimately because they didn't read the fine print that it's up to them to seek appropriate medical care, right?
Yeah,
So
we had the case
more
for suicide, teenager who did suicide based on recommendation from ChatGPT. That is just the beginning and shows us when people use ChatGPT. I'm really against ChatGPT, Claude, whatever. I think I'm pro AI, specialist AI, together with healthcare experts, because I know that I know people who are working on these systems where you get advice, but you have real clinical search and knowledge behind it. and not just what we see with normal AI, I would say. And you need to be also very conscious about the outcome, yeah?
But that's the key that we discussed at the beginning of our session, educating the consumers that just putting very viable questions for their important life, but in a non-appropriate tool is going to lead to potentially catastrophic consequences. There are other tools that are specifically trained for healthcare and life sciences that were trained like that, designed like that, with all the clinical best practices embedded. Those are the appropriate tools that need to be used. But like with everything, if you use a tool unwisely, it's gonna yield very bad outcomes. So
Yeah,
like you
we'll
highlighted,
come
there
back
are
to you.
great, absolutely, there are great platforms now who are designed only for healthcare, only for pharma, only for research. And if they were trained appropriately, but according to all the clinical best practices we have, they can do a great job. I would like to throw in one more little wrinkle, which is really important, and this is also based on my in-person experience in deploying technology. We always compare the tools that we have, not just AI, with clinicians. But as someone that did quality and safety as a chief quality and safety officer at the national level, supervising thousands of physicians in hundreds of hospitals, not all clinicians perform equally. So if we compare clinicians on average with AI or other tools on average, it's one thing. But what if I tell you that some clinicians perform only at 30% compared to their peers? Not all clinicians perform in the top decile or in the top 1%. So if you look at how clinicians actually underperform according to their own peers, AI will always outperform those that are lagging at the bottom, the clinicians. So that's the tough dilemma we have from an ethical perspective as well. I have seen technology implementations where unfortunately the AI performed better than 2/3 of the clinicians because the clinicians weren't up to par with the latest clinical best practices. So both sides of the coin are very important. Both involve a lot of ethical decision making. And in both, always striving for excellence, safety, quality will yield the best outcomes. Doesn't matter if it's humans or technology, whichever technology.
This is almost, I would say a good roundup of what you said before, how we create trust, who's the doctor in the room. There is not only one answer. And maybe also it's not too bad to have a specialist AI. We now have virtual hospitals for certain questions to help people in remote areas if we can guarantee the infrastructure. So if you want to give one ask to people how they deal with this world of technology in healthcare, what would be your ask to key stakeholders, in particular C-level executives whom we all know and also work with? What is it? An ask and maybe a recommendation?
For C-suite, it's very clear to me. I would ask to please upskill yourself and your board, completely disrupt your board, and completely upskill yourself as the CEO, because otherwise you're not going to be able to understand what your board is recommending to you and make the best decisions for your enterprise. So there I have no doubt in terms of recommendations. The traditional models don't work, and our amazing skills we all accumulated over past decades are not enough. They're not sufficient. So we need to add. That's why we use upskill, and in certain situations, reskill, to be able to make good decisions that are for the patient's good and for the enterprise optimal.
And for society. Yeah.
Definitely.
Thanks a lot for this exciting talk. Far too short. But thanks for giving us the amazing insights into the different perspective also that you have. And what I would say is that we both are big defenders for human at the core of everything. You mentioned trust gets built through humans, not through technology. So it's really technology is not what saves us, it's really people who will serve us. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting.